and I could see that the earth was essentially one, and that we as human beings have a unique creative and spiritual responsibility for the state of the earth, because really by the state of our hearts we can create around us in our environment effects. And I could see that nothing existed for an instant without purpose. Nothing existed alone. No thought went unnoticed. The intention of no heart went without impact upon every molecule in existence, let alone you can imagine the impact of one heart upon another, even of people who had no connection or way of knowing one another. You could see that the earth was one, and that we, as the human body, were one.
And I was so in love with the being of light that I and everyone else just melted back into this primal oneness. And it was just perfect. It was like the essence or the quintessence of everything that ever will exist before in the next cycle of creation was there. And I believe that we were all there, and we were all one. And I found myself coming out of this unity as a drop in this cosmic ocean and saying, oh, I remembered that I had been Beverly, but here I was, one with God and one with all things. And it was like a drop of water in the ocean. I was separate, and yet I was part of that ocean, the cosmic ocean of God and of all creation.
That's what I felt like. I felt like I was sugar daddy. And I felt like I was sugar. And I was stirred into this infinite bowl of light water. And although I was still Andy, I remember being Andy. Although I was still Andy, I was now the light. And every other piece of the light there was the light. And it was fantastic. And it was so fun, because the light is really very humorous. It's a fun place to be. It's kind of like McDonald's on steroids. It's a fun place.
I then was taken to an area where it was shown to me the creation of the world. And this was shown in a way as if a giant tablet appeared in space, and all the history of the world unfolded in me rapidly, yet I understood everything, and I was part of all things that had happened somehow. I was connected to this, and I could understand it. I could understand so many things so rapidly and completely that there is no way to explain this to anybody.
And the light welcomed me. The light absorbed me into the light. So I was part of the light. And once I was in the light, I knew everything the light knew. I knew all about the universe. I knew everything about flowers, about plants, about asteroids, about suns, about novas, everything. I didn't have a question for the light. Why? Because I know all the answers. I had nothing to ask.
I had this feeling of incredible clarity where suddenly everything made sense. And I understood. I understood why I had the cancer. I understood how everything in my life had led me to that point in time where I was lying there dying on that hospital bed. I understood also that we are amazing, magnificent, powerful beings, because I felt my energy, my essence was so huge and powerful and amazing, powerful beyond my imagination, beyond anything I could ever have known before. And I realized that I had never known this. It was the first time that I knew this. And then I realized that now that I knew what I knew, if I go back into my body, my cancer was going to heal. And it was at that moment that my father impressed upon me, now that you know the truth, go back and live your life fearlessly.
True learning happens in the body. And this is a big deal to me personally, because so much of my life was about wanting to escape the body and wanting that for other people. And I also grew up hearing, you know, when you die, you get to, you know, take off that glove and you get to, you know, be free. And so I kind of thought, like, here is the more negative, there the more positive. And with this understanding in this place that the body is, in a way, there, as hard as it is to see and understand, true learning happens within the body, because when we are in experience in this form, there's something that evolves within us, that can evolve within us at soul level, that makes the body an important part of the whole, that it, you know, that it isn't one's good and one's bad, but that the two work together in an important way. So that was very healing for me personally, to come to a better understanding of the body.
And there before me was the living presence of the being of light. And this being was all-knowing. It knew everything that was going to happen and will happen, and the reasons behind them. And there was a perfect justice, and it also contained all things that ever were or will be. And it was loving me. It was just pouring out this unconditional love at me. And I thought, well, this isn't the guy on the top of the Sistine Chapel. I had this, you know, image of, you know, what God would be like, but I figured this has to be God, because this is beyond words and perfect in every possible sense. And it just also didn't make sense to me, because the world that I had left behind, we were at war in Vietnam, and I was very angry about the war, and about all the suffering that goes on this planet, and the Holocaust, which I had learned about, and we were learning more at the point in 1970. We were learning how horrible it had been. And so what happened was, in a sense, the love kept coming to me, but, like, you know, I just couldn't receive it at that time. And I got to ask all my big whys. I got to ask all of the things that I had ever wondered about. And those were the top 3 things that struck me, that I had spent a lot of time thinking about, and in my justification for not believing in God. and what happened is, all of my thoughts just went out telepathically, and the answers, the perfect answers, came back. It wasn't the way, like, we talk, it was like the entire answer and all of its ramifications instantly came into my head. And the only thing I remember, I don't remember the details, this was specifics of the answers, but I knew that I had known these things before. And I thought, oh, of course, how could I ever have forgotten? And so what happened is, after a while, I ran out of questions, because I got it. I got the whole picture, the perfect knowledge that is present in the mind of God or everywhere, and I understood it.
The light itself was composed of, if I recall correctly, it's as if it was the higher self of everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I remember this particular man, and he had a very unusual experience, because when he went into the light, he had a question, and he said, "What are you really? You know, what is this? What are you?" And he said that he was not just enabled to enter into the light, but he passed through the light. And when he could, as it were, look back on the light, he saw it was almost like a constellation of human souls. That it was everybody's higher self, as you were describing. And again, that had a tremendous effect on this particular individual. But his experience went deeper than most. And in one chapter, I know the one that you're referring to, in Lessons from the Light, I present some cases like his of the deepest, the most complex near-death experiences that I've discovered in the course of my research. And in all of these, although I don't have many of them, as with this man, people go into and then through the light, and they seem to go almost as if on a journey through the universe, and they get to a second light. They get to something that seems to be the primordial light, or the light of creation, or the light of God. I don't even know what terms are adequate to describe it. This man was one of those who had something more like the full near-death experience, although obviously he never died, but he penetrated further than most people ever have an opportunity to do. And so many people say, even when they enter into the experience of the light, "I was home." One man said, "This is where I always was and always will be, and my life on earth was just a brief instant." So it's like in this brief instant that we call life, of course, which seems to expand and seems to be the totality of it. I mean, that's maybe all that we are aware of. But when we have the near-death experience, we realize this life is just a flicker. And where we really are and where we truly have our being is in that primordial light. And there we are truly all one. We are truly all one anyway, but we have the realization that we are one. We know it. It's not just an intellectual conviction.
The feeling that I had was that I was home. This is where I came from. And that part of this remembering that I had in my NDE was that I had come back to where I came from. So we went on this tour, and everything was just radiant and alive. There's no dead matter. Every star, every light that we see in the sky, it is a being, is alive.
And I was running about just joyfully being home. I knew it was home. I mean, it felt so familiar, so welcoming, so embracing. It felt like home. People say heaven, whatever word you want to put on it. The only word I could place was this was home. And I was running about joyfully, and I also got the message that I wasn't there to stay.
I asked that God's will be done, whatever that meant. And that's what I mean when I say it was the first time I really meant it. And at that moment, everything changed. I was immediately overcome with a very physical and real sensation of being held and comforted and reassured that everything was fine. My husband would be fine, my young children would be fine, and it was that word fine, not great, but fine. They would be fine regardless of whether I lived or died. So I rose up and out of the river, and I was immediately greeted by a group of somethings, people, spirits, beings. I'm never quite sure what name to give them because those words mean different things to different people, but they were people I had known forever, and I knew that they had known me for as long as I had existed. And they were so absolutely overjoyed to see me and welcome me and greet me, and I knew that they were there to guide me. I knew they were there to protect me, and I just couldn't believe it. I was absolutely overcome with a sense of being home, which again is it's so much fun to say that in a group of people who get it. I mean, I was finally home, and I was going to sleep in my own bed. And it was great. And I was surprised by that, because again, in my experience, I was still me. I was still my personality, my cynical self, really. And I was thinking, this is nuts. But I was really surprised by that sense of being home, and I was really surprised by my ability to look back at the river and see what was going on. And of course, there was this shift in time dimension. I don't know what the right words are to describe that, but of course, time and dimension really lost all meaning. And so I was able to be celebrating with these people and simultaneously watch the guys pull my body to the shore and start CPR. And I recognized my body as mine. I recognized it as my life, that it represented my husband, my 4 young children. And I was really surprised by the fact that I wasn't going back. And I was not a person who was trying to escape something. I had a great life. I still have a great life. I had a great job. I had a husband that not only loved me, but I loved dearly. And I had 4 young children that I loved more than I could ever imagine loving something on earth. I had a great life, and I had every reason to come back. But I had no intention of coming back. Now keep in mind, I mean, if people have oftentimes asked me, well, didn't you feel guilty? And you know, I like to say, well, keep in mind that I had already been reassured by Christ that they would be fine. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But I was really surprised by that. So, you know, I was on this threshold, and we're having a great time. And then, of course, the people, these angels, spirits, guides, whatever you want to call them, then told me that it wasn't my time, that I had more work to do on earth, and that I had to go back to this body that I'd already said goodbye to. And so I did what I thought was reasonable. I said, I'm good. No, you know, everything's fine. I'm not going back. I'm here. I lost that argument. I'm a doctor, not a lawyer. So I was very sad to then be taken back down this path.
This other light enveloped me. And this was a light that near-death experiences later, I didn't know anything about near-death experiences at the time, but when they started talking about the light, I started crying, you know, because, oh my God, other people have experienced this light. Everything disappeared. It was like I had no body and there was a separation, there was a sense of self in it, but I felt like I was in a warm bath of love, pure, unconditional love. And it was warm, it was welcoming. All my worries, all my fears, all my stress were gone. It was pure bliss. And even though it was all light, it wasn't, I was seeing anybody or anything, I felt it was home. And I wanted to stay there forever. I said, oh my God, this is love. And I was thinking, you know, I want to stay in this light forever. I just bask in this wonder. And slowly it kind of dissipated, went away. And I'm in my bedroom in this state of awe. I was just in the state of amazing awe, and it was still lit up. And I turned to my side and I see white robes standing next to my bed. And then I looked up. Holy moly, that's Jesus. And he was looking at me with intense blue eyes that I've never seen anybody with with those blue eyes. And he said to me one sentence, and that was, but he didn't move his lips. I heard his voice, male's voice, in my head, or wherever I just heard it. Don't waste your life thinking you're not loved. And when he said the word your life, I felt this. It was palpable how precious my life was. And not just how precious my life was, but how precious everybody's life was, including that kid in Africa.
And during my time there, I had a complete understanding of the divine order of the universe, how it could possibly be true that there is a God that is real and present today, knows each and every one of the billions of us on this planet individually, loves each and every one of us as though we're the only ones, and has a plan for each and every one of us and for the world that's one of hope.
It was like I had access to everything. And what struck me so strongly in my experience was being able to not just see that there was math and science in everything. It wasn't like, if a teacher gets up at the front and says, let me show you this math, or, let me teach you this. I was all of it. And I knew that while I was these things, this math and this science and this order that was in the universe, I knew that there was nowhere that it wasn't. And even if there's a tiny bug going across the room, I knew that that was within this math and science too, in this beautiful order. And so for me, it was beyond just beautiful, because my life before the experience, I struggled with looking out in the world and feeling like this really looks chaotic. I get that God's in charge and he gets to have the remote control to our lives and, pick what he wants. And then in the end, he'll explain why he did it. But it just seems so chaotic, and it doesn't seem like sensible enough that any being should be able to do it this way. And it frightened me, and it wasn't enough for me. It didn't appease me to see things this way. And so in my experience, to be within this order and see it, there was so much order, it was beyond anything I could imagine or ever put word to. It was incredibly beautiful and peaceful. And it's funny because also before my experience, I couldn't stand math and science, and it was like this huge mental block for me. I couldn't even get to like third grade math without just plugging my ears. Like, there's no way. It used to frustrate my dad because he tried to help, and it wasn't going to happen for me. I've always struggled with spatial things, time and space and numbers and things like that, because I was someone who had to feel everything inside of me. So to be having teachers in school trying to teach me something that I couldn't step inside of and feel or taste just didn't work for me. And then being in this experience where I could feel it all, it was really, really cool.
And he has beautiful ornamentation around him and on him. And as beautiful as he is, I can tell he's incredibly powerful. And I'm a little scared, because it feels like if he moved this hand, he could create a mountain. If he moved this hand, he would destroy the mountain. And I couldn't believe I was getting to be in front of such a big, powerful being, and that his focus and attention was on me. And he began to show me images. And he was showing me a flat plain. And the plain started to come together, and it was this kind of violent coming up of a mountain, and it was such a big event, and I was kind of scared and stepping back, and then the mountain started to erode. And the sand was coming down, and pieces were coming down, and then hillsides were coming down. And he was showing me it was making a beach. And he said to me, "Shall we bring down the mountain so you can have the beach?" And I said, "No, I like the mountain and the beach. I love when my feet walk in the warm sand on the beach. That feels so good." And he said, "Destruction makes available the ingredients for creation." Bringing down the mountain is part of making the beach. What looks like total destruction now is making available the ingredients for creation.
God, face to face. Face to face. God didn't have a face, by the way. Remember, there's no stuff there. But he wasn't the guy with the big white beard and the lightning bolts. Let me put it that way. And I'll tell you what God looked like, kind of. I've never been able to paint this. I've been trying and trying and trying, and I just can't get it. Yet, not yet, anyway. So pretend you are the Hubble Space Telescope. And so this is surrounding you on all levels, okay? Everywhere. And you know when you look at a photograph of a galaxy is made up of little points of light, stars, right? Little points of light, jillions of them, right? And in this case, it was infinite. It went on forever. Little points of light. And I was one of those points of light. And we were all connected. And each one of those points of light was every tsetse fly, every snail, every human being, every rock who had ever lived. And that's right, rocks are alive. I can't explain that, but rocks are also made out of love. Everything is made out of love. So it was like every being who had ever lived was there. And we were all connected. We were all one thing. And now we were separate. I was still Raymond, me. But I was also we collectively together were God. And I had this feeling of, I have all the potential and power of God. I wasn't God, but somehow through the connection with all the other points of light, I was God. So I wasn't God, but I was God. And it was like this one big thought, one big floating sphere of awareness. And we were singing, and I'll never forget this. This was so beautiful. It was worship. That's the best word I can describe it. And it was about love. And it makes music as we understand it, it seemed like a cheap imitation. I could taste it and touch it and swallow it and digest it. And it took on whole other dimensions. And we were singing, I love you. We love you. It was all, we were worshiping one another with pure infinite love. And it was the most beautiful thing. And you know, I know a lot of people have a fear of death. I have zero fear of death. Matter of fact, I want to go back. I can't wait. I'm in no hurry. You know, I'm here to dance. I'm here to play this out as long as I can.
But I started thinking differently after that. So I seen them as animals, as their own person, like they're their own spirit too. And every plant that I see, I'm like, okay, plants are spirits too. Like I started seeing everything, the sky and the trees. I started appreciating all like nature, and I didn't before. I started understanding people more instead of, let's say if someone gets me mad really easy, after my experience, I more just understand them more. I try to think about what they're going through in life. Maybe something bad that they're going through, just like I was.